Okay, so now we're going to start with the first panel. I want to introduce the moderator of the first panel, who is Travis Plunkett. Travis is the Senior Director of the Pew Charitable Trust's Family Economic Security Portfolios. His team conducts policy-relevant research on ways to stabilize and strengthen families, finances, and a constrained fiscal climate. Their work seeks to understand how families can buffer themselves against financial shocks and increase their economic security. That said, I know Travis best as a longtime colleague and friend at CFA, who was always interested in our work on LMI savings and asset creation. So now I'm going to turn the stage over to Travis and his panel. Travis.
Morning, everyone. Pew is very pleased to co-sponsor the National Savings Forum. I commend the CFA staff for an excellent program. This morning's discussion is, the first panel is the implications of behavioral economics for savings. And we have an excellent panel whom I will introduce in a minute. As many in this audience know, traditional economic theory is based on the assumption that humans are rational economic actors with unbounded willpower who always act in their financial self-interest. We just need access to relevant information to make well-informed, carefully considered, and fully controlled decisions. Behavioral research, by contrast, has shown that we often make suboptimal or even irrational economic choices, knowing, for example, about strategies to increase your savings doesn't always lead you to save more. The gap between our intentions and our actions is often large. We compartmentalize our financial decisions in ways that are not always predictable or ideal. For instance, by taking on high-cost loans instead of using lower-cost credit options or tapping into your savings. We tend to undervalue our future needs and overestimate our decision-making abilities. Traditional approaches to increasing savings have focused on giving people more information or increasing incentives such as tax incentives or match savings. However, in part because of the behavioral research and the quirks that I've mentioned, these strategies have often had a disappointing or a limited impact. And I should also mention, in large part because of the work in the field of groups like America Saves. In the last decade, there's been a great deal of experimentation with promising savings approaches that incorporate behavioral insights. You've just heard Steve Brobeck's thoughts on their experimentation. The job of this panel today is to sort through these policy and market-based experiments and to critically examine which approaches have the most potential or not to significantly increase savings for LMI households. Fortunately, our panel is extremely able to do this. We have experts on both savings, on economics, and on behavioral theory. So starting at my far left, Josh Wright is Executive Director at Ideas 42. Ideas 42 is a nonprofit organization that works with foundations, businesses, and government agencies to use behavioral insights to address a wide range of social problems, including low household savings. Many folks in this room know Josh from his prior job at the Office of Financial Education and Financial Access at the Department of Treasury. Keith Ernst is an Associate Director for Consumer Research and Examination Analytics in the Division of Depositor and Consumer Protection at the FDIC. Keith leads a staff who provide research and analytical support to FDIC examination efforts and conduct original research, including the FDIC National Survey of Unbanked and Underbanked Households, and he will talk in a minute about that. Lisa Menza is Director of the Aspen Institute's Initiative on Financial Security and is an expert in using financial tools to improve the economic security of the working poor. She leads a team of experts who study the financial products and public policy solutions that help build wealth from birth to retirement for working families. And finally, Bill Emmons is an Assistant Vice President and economist So any questions about traditional economic theory, go to Bill at the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. And he's working with the St. Louis Fed's Center for Household Financial Stability. His research is focused on household balance sheets, the relationship of these balance sheets to the broader economy. He also speaks and writes frequently on banking, financial markets, financial regulation, housing, and the economy. Is there anything left, Bill, that you don't speak and write on? Monetary policy. No questions on monetary policy. So we're going to start with an initial question for each panelist. We're going to cover some of the basics on quickly on savings and behavioral research, and then, as Nancy mentioned, dive beneath the surface to talk about behavioral strategies that are very promising for savings. The first person up will be Bill, and I've asked Bill to just provide baseline information for you on current household savings, so we're all starting from the same place, and then to talk about a little bit more about the traditional economic theories as they affect savings. Okay, Bill.
Thanks, Travis. The question I want to address is, who saves? Is that up here? If I go through? No. Don't know if we have the slides, but I have some information. I can just talk through them. So first, just from the standpoint of theory, starting after World War II, I would say traditional economic theory began from the premise everyone is basically the same. And you might get hit with different shocks that affects your spending and saving, but there's not much difference between individuals. Milton Friedman got a Nobel Prize for that. The next step was to say, well, there are differences across the life cycle. Young people, middle-aged and older people have different savings incentives. Franco Modigliani got a Nobel Prize for that. There we go. Okay, so I'm addressing the question, who saves? I would say really in the last 25, 30 years, the big movement within traditional economic theory is to recognize heterogeneity, that there are important differences across individuals and they matter. And so an individual I would point you to is Chris Carroll, a professor of economics at Johns Hopkins, who, as many of you know, currently is serving as the chief of research at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. So he's very engaged both in theory and the data that can underpin these theories. So I think what Chris Carroll in particular was very much early on, several decades, pointing out the precautionary savings motive, the idea of emergency savings that I think Steve talked about, as being fundamental in understanding why some people save a certain way and others seem to be more traditionally life cycle savers. The other thing I think that Chris Carroll and many others, of course, have stressed is that there are different sources of heterogeneity. Two big groups. One would be this traditional Milton Friedman kind of people are hit with different life experiences. So your life history determines to some extent what obviously your income and then but also your spending and savings patterns. But also some deeply rooted individual differences. Things that we at the Household Financial Stability Center are thinking about as demographic or cultural, social drivers of spending and saving behavior. Things, in addition to age, also just when you were born, your generation, your birth year cohort seem to make a difference. Your socioeconomic status, which we proxy in a lot of our work with educational attainment, since that's really very strong correlation across generations, parent to child in educational attainment, and also race and ethnicity, which probably they proxy for lots of cultural and institutional factors. And then there's also, of course, the behavioral approach, which is saying that many people, even taking into account all of these factors, seem to be making non-economically rational decisions. And so we're going to talk a lot about that. So what I want to do is give you just a very quick update on this question of who saves. I borrowed these numbers from Keith, and he'll, I hope, speak more to them. The percent of families that had a savings account in 2011, according to the FDIC, 71% of families report that they had an account to save. Well, already you immediately see the heterogeneity. There are 29% who don't. Why? Why do some have a savings account and some don't? So let's drill down a little bit. What about, that's just having an account, what about do people actually save? This is from the Survey of Consumer Finances, a question that's been asked since 1992, and so this is the average of all those responses. And in fact, answer to one of your questions, Travis, the time trends are not that different. There doesn't seem to be a lot of, if anything, saving has dipped a little bit in the 2010. These are at 3-year intervals, a little bit at the 2010 survey date, but not much trend over time. So these are fairly, seem to be fairly constant. So only 56% of families report that they actually saved in the year before the interview. What about race and ethnicity? This is FDIC again. The percent of families that have a savings account ranges from a high of 79% among Asians to as low as 53% among Hispanic-headed families. The Fed's Survey of Consumer Finances is not quite that granular. We use 4 categories, but I think you see a very similar pattern. Asian and all of the other race and ethnic groups are grouped into this category, but it's mostly Asians. 61% reported that they did save in the last year, and as low as 42% of black families reported that they had saved. This is the average over this 2-decade survey. In terms of educational attainment, which as I said we think of as proxying socioeconomic status, college degree holders, and here we define that as either a 2-year or a 4-year degree, 87% have savings account, or I'm sorry, this is FDIC, I'm not sure exactly how they define college. We define it as a 2- or 4-year degree. And that ranges down to only 41% of families that had not finished high school. This is now the Fed's Survey of Consumer Finances. College degree holders, 67% reported that they had saved, and only 39% of people who didn't finish high school reported that they had saved. Well, one of the nice things about the Survey of Consumer Finances is we can really dig even deeper and see what are the interactions, the relationships between, for example, race and ethnicity, as well as educational attainment. And in this case, also age. So we've actually got 3 different dimensions at work here. So I'm showing you family heads under the age of 40 at the time of interview, answering the question, did you save in the last year? So the blue bars at the front are whites and Asians, and from left to right, those with a college degree, high school, or no high school. And so you can see the very clear patterns of educational attainment, and the row of bars in the back are blacks and Hispanics together, and the first I should have said is whites and Asians together. So you can see again the educational attainment very clear there. And I just show you the middle-aged, which is very, very similar. In fact, this is a bit of a puzzle. There's not much difference across the life cycle. Young, middle-aged, and older families report saving at about the same frequency. And the puzzle is that you would expect much more of a hump shape, very much lower savings possibly by young families, very high savings rates among middle-aged, and then dropping off again among olders as they dissave. But that doesn't seem to be the case. But I'm showing you here the group we would expect to have the highest propensity to save, middle-aged families. And so really what I want to point to is that the educational dimension and the race-ethnicity dimension appear to be independent drivers of savings behavior. So in other words, for both the groups of whites and Asians and blacks and Hispanics, you see this very clear gradient across educational attainment, and then also from front to back in the chart, at each of those educational attainment levels, you see a very similar gap between whites and Asians and blacks and Hispanics. So I think to sum it up, race or ethnicity matter a lot, and so I would challenge our group and the subsequent discussions to be specific about how we think we're going to address these gaps that we've recognized in the data. As I say here, 60% of whites and Asians saves, about 43% of blacks and Hispanics saves, and that is a very solid long-term regularity. Educational attainment matters. 2/3 of college graduates down to only about 2/5 of high school dropouts report saving. And as I said, these are independent dimensions. Race and ethnicity, educational attainment appear to be independent. So for example, middle-aged black and Hispanic college grads are 25 percentage points more likely to save than black and Hispanic high school dropouts. That's the educational gradient. But middle-aged white and Asian college grads are 10 percentage points more likely to save than black or Hispanic college grads. And the differences are similar This is just saying in words what you saw in the pictures. So I think we need to be very cognizant of this enormous heterogeneity that exists across the population. I've just been showing you these demographic features, but of course, as I said, in each of these cases, there's unexplained differences within each group. So there are individual level differences also that we need to address. And I think for effectively addressing saving, we need to think about which of these dimensions are we most able to address. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
So next up is Josh Wright, and he has maybe the toughest job of the morning because I've asked him in like 5 minutes to distill 20 years of research and experimentation on behavioral approaches to savings. But Ideas 42 and Josh are very well positioned to explain behavioral theory and successes or not in the savings context. They are involved in a number of efforts and have a broad view of what's working and what isn't.
Thanks a lot, Travis. First, I just want to say it's nice to see many friendly faces that I don't get to see as often from my time at Treasury, so it's nice to see many of you again. The first thing I just want to sort of touch on is this issue of traditional versus behavioral economics. Just to make it clear that I don't think that these things are in conflict, but they're more complementary. It's not about one or the other way that humans operate all the time, but the fact that these two ways of thinking help us think about the complexities of humans, and that sometimes people operate the way we think of as they would in traditional economics, that people are kind of planners, we would call them cold thinkers. They act a bit more like Spock. They have the mental capacity at that time, the self-control at that time to contemplate the decision, really weigh a lot of the factors and make a decision. And that is kind of traditional economic theory, that people are operating with close to perfect information, that they weigh the costs and benefits, and then they decide to do something if the benefits outweigh the costs, and then naturally follow through occurs. Whatever they decide, they just go do it, no problem. Now, the thing that behavioral economics, I think, adds to that is that, I don't like to call them irrational, but as Travis described it, people are quirky or fallible in their decision making and follow through. And I think the way to think about that is kind of in two ways. One is we have trouble with decisions, right? So let's imagine some of the other ways that people might make decisions besides just weighing costs and benefits. So things like, what are my friends and family doing? That would be kind of social norms. What's more familiar to me, or what have I seen a lot? That would be something like familiarity bias. What have I done before? Which we're all often guilty of, status quo bias. We continue to do the thing we've done in the past. Choice overload. So there may be lots of choices. The choices may be very complex. We have trouble in those situations. The list goes on and on. I won't go through the 15 or 20 that I have written down here, but you get the sense that there are these other kind of biases or simple ways that we go about making decisions that cause us to end up somewhere other than what appears to be the benefits outweighing the costs. That's not irrational. That's kind of who we are as humans, and there's a real reason for that. We have lots and lots of decisions to make every day. If we had to be contemplative about every one, then we would never get out the door. The other reason is that a long time ago we used to live in a savanna and there were lions. And when we saw a lion, we didn't think to ourselves, should I run? We just ran. So there's part of your brain that is just set up to make quick judgments and decisions. And we run into problems most often when that kind of hot decision-making methodology is employed at the wrong time versus the cold decision-making approach. The second way we kind of have this problem is what we call the intention-action gap, which goes to that second piece of traditional economics, is that we don't naturally just do what we've decided to do. We have this intention, what we call the intention-action gap. And I'll just mention a few things here that are probably feel very familiar to you. One would be procrastination. If I asked you to raise your hand, I won't embarrass you. If you're a procrastinator, it's not even if you're a procrastinator, have you procrastinated on something in the last week? Everyone would raise their hand. Now, procrastination is a funny thing, right? You're not saying, I'm never going to do this thing. You're just saying, I'm not going to do it right now. And what really happens with procrastination, a set of very little decisions that seem to make total sense to you at that moment, result in you often never doing the thing, or if the thing has an exploding deadline, you don't get to it before the deadline. Another thing would be a fancy term called perspective memory, which is just psychologists' way of saying forgetting. And it's not that we totally forget, we just don't remember at the right time. So when the mortgage rates were at the lowest in history, I had it on my list, I needed to refinance. When would I remember to refinance? When I was falling asleep every night, right? So that's not really helpful, that's not at the right time. I ended up not refinancing and probably missed an eighth of a point, right? Rationally, if I was thinking about it, that's going to be probably tens of thousands of dollars over the course of my mortgage. I would have done it right away. And then the last thing, just to touch on, these are three common ones, is something called hassle factors, where, and that's not really a technical psychological term, but it's really just the idea that these little things, filling out a form, having to remember to go into a bank at a certain time, have an outsized impact. Traditional economics would in no way be able to, from a cost-benefit perspective, be able to explain why people let those little hassles get in the way. So the tough thing, so we're all like that. We all have those issues. Now we're here in particular to talk about low and moderate income people. And the thing that's probably the hardest for them is that all of this is exacerbated by scarcity. So Sendel, Mullynathan, and Eldar Shafir did some great research recently that basically shows how scarcity, having to manage scarcity, causes you to take up some of your cognitive bandwidth, some of your mind's capability, and then you have less of that capability to deal with these other decisions and follow through. So you have less self-control to focus on other items. And that's a constant, for low-income people and poor people, that's a constant. The scarcity is ebbing and flowing and causing them all the time to struggle with decisions. And I guarantee you, it's not about poor people having these problems, it's about scarcity, the context of scarcity creating these problems. If I put you in scarcity, think about your calendar time scarcity, you would act in the same way. You would make decisions where you don't think things through, you tunnel, you focus on the very short term. So now let's turn that to savings. I mean, Travis already alluded to this, but why do we all save in this room? We're in kind of one of three buckets. You make so much money you can't help but save. So I know in all of our government and nonprofit salaries, we're in the bucket of Warren Buffett and Bill Gates. More likely, it's about automation. Why do you have a retirement savings? It's because of 401k and that every month something comes out of your paycheck. You use split direct deposit to have some money go into a savings account, or you regularly have a setup where money's transferred from your checking account to your savings account. Now let's not forget, there's also a third set of people in this room among us who, like most Americans, do not save enough and don't have 3 months of income saved. We won't ask you to raise your hands, but I guarantee you that even at the middle income levels, people don't save enough, and it's very much because of these behavioral factors. So let's talk a little bit about then what gets to the features that might be helpful. We talked about automation a lot, but let's go a little bit deeper and then touch on a couple of successes, a couple problems, and maybe a little bit why things aren't getting to scale. So I'll try to be quick here. So other features that help. We talked about automaticity. Matches are very popularly talked about in savings. Let's think about combining those two things together. Let's think about, and there's research that shows this is quite effective, let's think about having the incentives, the match focused on having people set up the automation, so that then you use the incentive to create the one-time behavior instead of the incentive to try and get people to save on a regular basis. Now, given that, there is a given there that people have accounts. So we do have to have people have accounts, and we have to ask policymakers to do smart things like have the tax process establish an account for them when they get a big tax return, or at least have the option to do that or opt into that, something we worked on when I was at Treasury. Pre-commitments with follow-through work very well. So if you ask people, do you want to save today? I don't have so much money. Would you like your future self to save? They say, absolutely. Okay, let's make the decision now for your future self to save and try and have that commitment automatically followed through on. The best example of this is not the 401k opt-in, but something called Save More Tomorrow, which Dick Thaler came up with, where employees commit to saving their next raise. Vivid goals are actually quite powerful. So the most famous study around this is actually in India, where savings envelopes had a picture of a goal, often a child on them, versus a control group without any. And the numbers are kind of in the 20 to 25% range of increased savings based on vivid goals. And then lastly, I'll touch on some work that D2D has done, Dories to Dreams, or been the leader on, which is how do we use our lack of understanding around small probabilities to help ourselves, right? So lotteries use small probabilities to raise money for the state. Lotteries can also be used to get people to save. So how do you use prize-linked savings? Basically, this works like we're really good at looking at the numerator, the big number at the top of the equation of what we'll get, and really bad at understanding the denominator, which is we don't have a chance in hell of winning. Because if I say to you, you have a 1 in 100 chance of winning, you say that's really small. If I say to you, you have a 1 in a million chance of winning, in your mind, that's really small. 1 in a billion, it's all small. And we focus on that big number. So those are some of the features I think that can be helpful. And then let's talk about some of the actual successes. So there's actually been lots of piloting. There's been something we worked on, the financial health check with a credit union, where people came in, got a quick counseling session, but the session was focused on setting up automation or doing simple plan making around savings. The refund to asset work done with H&R Block, the prize-linked savings, autosave, the savings bond pilot that D2D ran, the Intuit savings approach at tax time. All of these things have been shown actually to increase savings rates. I think the place where and then there's been occasional things we've tried which haven't worked, and I think they've basically not worked because people got the diagnosis on what was going on incorrect. So the most famous one of these is people said, oh, defaults work for 401k plans, let's do that at tax time. Let's opt people into saving 10% of their refund into a savings bond, and they'll love it. They spent a lot of time to set up the experiment. They did it. No difference between people who were opted in versus opting out. What happened? They had the diagnosis wrong. They went back later and started to ask people, well, what were you thinking about when you got to your time of getting your tax return? People had already pre-committed the money. They wanted to buy a television. They wanted to pay off debt that they had. They wanted to treat their family. So the problem wasn't a problem of intention-action gap. It was a problem of decision. So they should have designed something to deal with commitment. But I think the biggest failing is we haven't figured out a way to get those tests that have work to scale. I don't have an easy answer around that, but I do think it's probably the biggest approach we can think about is how do these things make money for larger financial institutions. So as we do pilots in the future, I think we need to look at and start from the beginning of what does profitability look like for the bank? And that doesn't just mean that it makes money, but it meets the bank's profitability threshold, and then design some of these interventions in a way that would meet that threshold. So thanks.
Thank you. Hello? Is this working? Okay. Thank you, Josh. Next up is Keith. And one behavioral theory that is quite common, which I alluded to when talking about compartmentalized decision-making, is called mental accounting. And an extension of that theory, which is a point of debate in this community, would be that a segregated savings account, having a separate place to save your money, would lead you to save more and save more often. So my question to Keith is, what does FDIC research show about that issue, whether a separate segregated savings account does improve savings outcomes? And then what does their household survey show about what the barriers are to getting a savings account and then saving for different demographic groups?
Great. Thank you, Travis. So first, let me say thank you to CFA for organizing this event, bringing us together, and giving me the privilege of participating here. It's a real treat to be with you. A couple of quick disclaimers. I work for the FDIC. I don't speak for the FDIC on this panel. My opinions are my own. And second, I'm going to reference a few numbers from economicinclusion.gov from our survey that Bill referenced. I'm going to do it in a ballpark way. If you want the precise figures, go to the website. There's a lot of information there. So the first question, what are the benefits of having a savings account? Thought a little bit about this. We've not really gotten into sort of quantifying how much more people save when they don't have an account, but I think it's useful to take a step back and ask, what do we expect the benefits to be? Why do we expect it to be useful to have a segregated account? And I come up with 3 answers. The first sort of references the mental accounting issue that Travis referenced. It's just easier to tell how you're doing in your savings plan, how much you've set aside in savings when it's in a separate account than when it's bundled in your transaction account, whether that's a prepaid card or a standard checking account. The second is just the friction of having the money a little bit further removed from the option for spending. And I think that's a really critical point. Bill talked a lot about sort of how do we get people to move from sort of spenders to savers, and Steve referenced that in his opening remarks, and I think it's sort of a critical difference to have that friction, and that friction can be light. In a traditional savings account, there are limits on sort of convenient withdrawals. You can withdraw your money, but there are limits to how often you might be able to do it online or over the phone, and also just it's not in the available balance. So that's a pretty light example of friction, but it's a meaningful one. But friction can also be much heavier in savings accounts. So think about a CD. In a CD, if you take that money out early, you're going to pay a substantial penalty. So there's sort of a lot of barrier in the way to doing that. But in either case, the point is it makes it just a little bit harder to spend that money than if it's in your available balance in your transaction account. And the third benefit, which maybe speaks more to longer term accounts like retirement savings, is that the earnings on those accounts are sort of automatically redirected and repurposed to more savings. So if you don't take the money out, the interest is just going to roll over in that savings account and will earn more interest on itself over time. So I think those are sort of the 3 large benefits to it. When we look at our data, this has been mentioned already this morning, but 30% of households don't have a savings account. 8.2% of households don't have a banking relationship at all. And so getting to this issue of heterogeneity and thinking about sort of what does that tell us about the challenge, there's actually a little bit of good news there, which is that 2/3 of the population that doesn't have a savings account already has a banking relationship. They don't need to find the right identification to bring down at the institution to set up an account. They already have that relationship. They're already in the bank system. And so the lift is a little lighter in some sense than getting people to enter the banking system for the first time. Even among the unbanked, though, there are sort of interesting points that come out in our data, in our survey of unbanked and underbanked households. So 1/3 of the unbanked report that they're somewhat or very likely to open an account in the future. And in fact, we do see a lot of movement in and out of the banking system over time. A majority of those who indicate that they want to open that account give reasons consistent with savings for a motivation. So they will say, I want to open an account to save money for the future, or I want to have a safe place to put my funds. And remember, this is a population, the unbanked population, that is disproportionately very low income, and may lack some of the employment opportunities that the population at large has. And in fact, 40% of them who indicate that they want to open an account in the future and they want to do it for savings purposes also say they feel like they don't have enough money right now to do it. So there's some affirmation of sort of the story Josh is telling about sort of the future self wanting to save, but it being a challenge right now. And I hope that this information could be useful for sort of both affirming that and framing it for people who are in that situation. Now, Josh mentioned Sendil and Eldar's book, Scarcity. It's a great read. If you've not done it yet, I'd encourage everybody to take a chance to pick it up and go through it. And tunneling does have some real consequences. When households sort of don't have the bandwidth, don't have the capacity to process the information because of those burdens in their life, it can cause them to sort of over-focus on short-term goals. But also in that book, Sendil and Eldar point out that there is a benefit to saving or to tunneling, right? Getting away from the lion, it becomes a really important priority in that moment in time. And so you're very focused on that. And so I think a key question for practitioners is, how do we get savings into the tunnel? How do we connect with immediate and real needs that households are facing now so that solving it becomes sort of an immediate priority? And I think the data that we collect can provide windows into this. I don't think we quite, through our survey, get to the level of actionable information that tells you, go here and say this to this population or move this message. But I think if we look to our data, we start to get insights into the kinds of challenges that households with savings may be grappling with, what may already be in their tunnel. And so Bill showed data about race, he showed data about education, there's data about income, but we also have data about family structures, about employment status. And so, for example, 45% of households headed by women don't have a savings account. 20%, a little less than 20%, are fully unbanked. And so you can start to think about sort of what are the likely challenges that these households are experiencing. What's in the tunnel for that woman-headed household? What are the things they're likely to grapple with? And how does that connect to savings? And how do we make that sort of present in the real term? I'm going to be a little brief here because I want us to get to the Q&A. I'm looking forward to that exchange, but I'll just sort of reflect on one program that was presented at the FDIC last year that is sort of a hybrid between a credit and savings program, but gets in the tunnel immediately. So there's a group called Mission Assets Fund out in California that has a program that connects with youth graduating from foster care who need to move into an apartment on their own. They don't have enough money for a security deposit typically, but it's a real and pressing immediate need. And so they sort of put the money up front, allow the youth to pay it back over time, and at the end of that sort of savings or credit cycle, however you want to think about it, they have an asset that they can take with them and bring to other apartments. So it's an example of connecting immediately to a real need that is front and center in front of that household and that they're very motivated to accomplish. And so I think, you know, behavioral economics can help us think about those sorts of strategies. And I think particularly when we connect to data that we either get from sort of large information sources or like the FDIC survey research, but also from our local programmatic efforts in the populations we're working with directly. So I think that's about where I'll leave it, but I'll look forward to sort of our discussion. Thank you.
Okay, Lisa Menza's very well versed to answer a question about policy, and I'm going to frame it in a slightly provocative way. You're talking to regulators, and you're particularly talking to legislators, members of Congress on the Hill frequently about these issues. And although research consistently shows that low to moderate income families can save, it also shows that these families can save fairly small amounts only. As Steve mentioned, CFA research shows that even small amounts can make a difference. But the question I have for you is, what are you hearing from policymakers on that? Has that sunk in? Do they still worry, as some researchers do, that income instability and income problems are the most significant barrier for these families to savings and throw up their hands? And you know, what policies do you think are gaining traction that are you know, positive, that have great potential among the policymakers you talk to?
Great, Travis. Thank you. Wonderful to be back with Nancy and Steve and this great table. It's really fun to have a bigger group and a little more time. And I love the question. What are we hearing from policymakers? Are we still in this recession mindset where we can't think about savings, and what's gaining some traction? I want to give some hope to our conversation here, because I actually think we have some positive news that answers directly your questions about, are we able at the policy level to even think about savings, and are we gaining any traction? And I want to start by saying something about retirement. And I want to explain why I think a lot of the policymaker focus is on retirement, when, as we heard from Steve's opening comments, a lot of what America Saves has learned is about our need to transact and our need to save for emergencies. So I want to give an image. I love all the images that are coming here. I love the lion. Thank you, Josh, for that. I think when we think retirement, we're thinking of slippers. And we are thinking about some dusty thing that's way off. And I want to say that we should switch that image. I think we need to think about a tree. And the trees are what our policy focus has been about. And trees aren't slippers. Trees are really important. And I think there is a reason that most of our policy work around savings has been around retirement. I mean, if you just, where in the tax code do we benefit retirement? It's not for, where do we benefit savings? It hasn't been for emergencies. It's been for these long-term goals. It's about the trees. And the beauty about the trees is that you can do a lot while the tree is growing. You can do a lot of things that relate to the tree. And I think that's where traction is. And that's why I think we should not take, I think there's hope in the fact that even though the policy conversation is really about retirement, not about the insights that we've talked about, not too much about them, about emergency saving, I think there's room and there's hope. So two things I'd like to say. One is about policy around workplace savings and tax time savings. I think these are two arenas where we've seen some traction. And I want to end on matching, this issue of matching, because I think this is another policy area. So first, workplace and tax time. I think in the policy conversation, there has been a movement to focus savings policy on where money is. And money is close to work, and money is close to tax. And I think both those arenas have been gaining traction. So let me give you a few examples. First, on tax time. I love the tax time moment. I think, and Josh mentioned an organization that I'm on the board of, D2D, and I think some of the innovation has been around, can we make a tax time moment easier to save? And we've resurrected this notion of plain old boring savings bonds. And thank goodness, there is back to new attention on making the instrument of a savings bond easier. There's a bill by Representative Cartwright to make, the plain old savings bond easier. And this has even leaked over into our thinking about retirement savings. The newest thing that the president mentioned in his State of the Union address, hope you were all listening, was the MyRA, the notion that, well, why don't we just create a very simple bond fund for retirement? And I don't have to ask Congress for it. We'll just create it at Treasury. It'll be safe. It'll be simple. Those kind of behavioral insights have shifted the game. So I want to move from tax time to workplace savings. So if you don't know, MyRA is the notion that the Treasury will create a window, first available only to a few businesses, but later with expectations that other can buy in. It's the simple training account, training wheels account. Anybody can get in. $25 will get you started. I think there's a lot of behavioral insights that are making it into the legislative wheels and the thinking about how to make this kind of savings simpler. In addition to MyRA, Senator Hatch came up with, why don't we start let's give it a starter 401k. How could we make this small businesses, which is really where our challenge is at the workplace, simpler? Everybody's sort of listened to Josh. You're winning. People know automation, simplicity, structure. Those are now the watchwords. Unfortunately, what we found out is that the word automatic was the president's first idea. Automatic IRAs can also be construed as mandate, not a popular word in the policy frame. So if we can not talk mandates and talk automatic, it's a much more popular sell. I think everybody is moved by a stat that I think is built on Dallas Salisbury's EBRI data, that about 70% of people with incomes under 50,000 will save at work if they have a shot at it. But if they're on their own and they're making under $50,000, the chance that they're going to start, just walk to the bank and open an IRA, is at about the 5% level. So people have grasped at the federal level that this automation, that structuring savings where money is made, is our best shot. If we're only getting 5% out of the voluntary, rational actor, find your own way, we got to make the channels. I think one of the most exciting channels, though, is matching. And I like Josh's insight about how do we make the moment even more rewarding, or maybe, Keith, it was one of your insights. And I'm of a certain age, and I grew up watching I Love Lucy. And I Love Lucy. Lucy worked for a bank, if you recall. It was a disastrous employment idea. But her job was always to, try to keep the bank customers happy. And they were always giving away toasters for new accounts. Now that sounds so hilarious. Like, who even toasts anymore? But the notion of a big incentive, opening an account. And I think matching is the toaster again. And it's the sense that, could you get people motivated to, is there a big win? Is there some kind of prize? And I think matching and a big boost is the modern toaster, of how we get people in. Probably our best toaster, our best sort of prize, has been this Savers credit that's been on the books, but very modestly construed. Very few people qualify for it, but it's a check from the IRS to you. And I think I have been in many discussions with financial leaders, with policy leaders, and I do feel we are closer. Washington from the outside looks like a disaster, but a level down, there are many. When people aren't going to the Rose Garden, they're talking. And there is a broader sense of conversion on things that would matter. And I think matching is one of these popular ideas that doesn't offend. We get it that it costs to do this, but in a time when we are looking for smart solutions that could drive bigger behavior, be the modern day toaster, I think that is an idea that is out there, kind of ready to be plucked. So I'm going to give some hope that even when we're not talking emergency and we're talking retirement, I think it's a signal that policymakers they've listened and that they're closer on this, and that both our policy about where money is made, work and tax, that's where the answers are, and that matching some kind of grounded incentive where it goes into, it's not just, maybe we'll get this, but a more automated system of incentives is where the excitement of the discussion around savings is at the policy level.
Thanks, Lisa. So start thinking about your questions. I'm going to ask the whole panel a question. Hopefully there'll be a little discussion and debate, and then I'll turn it over to you. So just following up on exactly what Lisa just said, speaking of scarcity, we're living in a time of scarcity regarding governmental budgets. And should this research that has accumulated over the last 20 years and the experiments that have sort of pointed the right direction for us behaviorally be used now to make some hard choices regarding at least public expenditures? For example, a study that has received a lot of attention found that tax incentives in Denmark were not particularly useful in spurring retirement savings, whereas automation and prompts were. So that's my question to all four panelists if they want to deal with it, and then I'll turn over questions to our audience.
I think there's a lot of evidence that a lot of benefit programs, for example, or all sorts of provisions in the tax code are not used by everyone who could benefit from them. So probably some thinking about how do you make it more automatic. I mean, as you say, Lisa, you have to stay away from mandatory, but a lot of money just that should be finding its way to people who could use it isn't getting there. And I think there are ways to think about how to maybe the policy folks on the panel can think more about that. But how do you make these great sounding provisions in policy actually get to the people who need them?
Anybody agree, disagree? I know Lisa's ready to go.
Yeah, I have a nuance on that. I mean, it's not used, but it isn't fairly done either. If a saver's credit has never been refundable, so you can't get it. You can't get it if you file on the short form. So we intentionally, that's an intentional way of saving money. And that incentive needs to change in order for it to be real. Because if you didn't owe the federal income taxes, you were never going to get it, even if you saved your $500 somehow, some way. So I think first it's an honest conversation about structuring the incentive. And I know that Raj Chetty data says incentives don't work, structure does, but we actually have to structure the incentives so that they're real. We have to get over our allergy to the word refundable or change the word, and to make these things really match people's lives. And I think that the new way of putting both the account and the incentive together, what we miss with the incentive conversation is if it's only a motivation, then we miss the need for it also to contribute to the great quest of adequacy. The reason we need a match on retirement, the reason our employers, if we're lucky enough, give us a match, is not just to keep us in the program. They've got us. It's also to make sure we end up with something. So I think incentive has two goals, both to keep us in, but also to keep the accounts worth something, both to the financial institution and to us.
Josh.
Yeah, I mean, I want to stress that about match. Like, match is a great way to, for lack of a better word, transfer money to people. It's not necessarily a great way to, in and of itself, to get them to do the savings themselves. So, but let's combine those two things together. I think to your original question, I don't see how you can't look at the research. If we're concerned about, in tight budget times, thinking about this from a return on investment perspective, and we think it's important for people to save more, how can we not plan automation? And then the second thing is, if we don't make things simpler, we don't have automation, if we care about low and moderate income people, there's actually this perverse impact of means testing, which is that the people that need it the most have to jump through the most hoops, but have the least cognitive resource at that time, because they're managing all the other issues of scarcity, to jump through those hoops. And low-income people are not homogenous either, right? So what poverty means is a wide range in America. And if you're close to the poverty line, that's one context. It's hard. But if you're deep down into the poverty, the potential to save, or the situation that you're dealing with and managing your life is drastic and harsh. So we can't forget that aspect, that if we care about the lowest income, we need to think about what the complexity or means testing and not making it simple does to them in this kind of unfair cognition tax.
Okay, questions? So I assume we have, what's our approach here? We have a traveling mic. Okay. 1 second. 2 traveling mics. Yes.
Hi.
Sorry to interrupt. Could you please introduce yourself and who you work with?
Sure. My name is Sanaye Mohammed. I'm with Clarify from Philadelphia. And I was wondering what excites you, if anything, regarding workplace financial education that's going on right now. There's a lot of workplace-based financial education that's hitting the marketplace. And I was wondering what, if anything, excites you about that with respect to automation and simplicity. And what, if anything, are your concerns regarding bringing that type of financial education to the workplace?
So I'll throw this first to Lisa, since she focused on workplace savings, and then we'll open it up.
So what excites me? I'm excited by any workplace that's interested in furthering its employees' success at their jobs and in their financial lives. What doesn't excite me is that it's a minority of workplaces, and that some of the best programs are not where we have the biggest problems. I guess one of the exciting things is that since the Pension Protection Act made it easier for companies to automate things like workplace retirement plans, we've seen just huge uptake. That's one of the big successes. That's from 2006 to where we sit now in 2014. What's frustrating to me is that the workplaces that I'm thinking about, gas stations, taxi cabs, food service with 3 employees, all of that is kind of left out of the conversation. And so I've worked for big employers and learned a lot in those settings. And I think that's an exciting arena. And some of our biggest employers actually employ a lot of low-income people. And I think if you get smart sessions there, it's wonderful. We're there, you show up. But I think our hunger should be for the rest of America that's working at places where you're under 20 employees. That's a huge growth in workplaces, and certainly post-recession too. And so what frustrates me is how do we reach a lot of folks? And that's where I think that portal is limited, So that's my answer. I think it's exciting where it can happen. People are usually looking for fair delivery of those services, and we have a debate on whether that has to be a nonprofit or that can be a financial institution and still be non-biased. But my bigger hunger is for a big group of Americans whose workplace is quite small, and where we have a big hunger to be in the financial system and savings system.
Well, I'll chime in for a minute. I think I'm going to pass it down to Josh next here. So I think what's exciting for me is that it feels like we're finally in a time period where we have research showing the value of financial capability and financial literacy efforts, and we can draw insights from that. At the FDIC, we've developed a curriculum called Money Smart, which is we promulgate through a train the trainers model across the country. Maybe many of you in this room are partners with us on that effort. But sort of the notion that we are in a period where we are able to sort of bring the resources to bear to test sort of the different approaches and to try and find out what's working to actually impart knowledge, what's working and resulting in behavioral changes, not just knowledge after the class, but 6 months or a year down the road, and showing sort of lasting gains. The fact that we're able to demonstrate that, I think, is promising both for practitioners and is valuable to policymakers trying to decide where to invest resources, both public and private policymakers, really.
So there's 2 sides to this coin. There's the side that I'm very excited about, which I think starts with the perspective of a sustainable business model and productivity. So I think the exciting thing is that some employers are starting to say, these are real issues for my employees, and if I don't help them solve them, they'll be less productive as employees. And if I can solve them, it's money well spent and more productive. And that creates a virtuous positive circle where employers want to invest in those types of programs and give them to employees because the employee's better off and they make more money. I think the types of programs that work like that are ones that are focused on action, follow-through, and connections to real quality products. The place I'm pessimistic or a little bit unhappy about is where I think that where programs are focused on just providing information and giving people homework and are really more about window dressing, where employers are trying to get a positive publicity hit for doing something for their employees, but there's not really any there around productivity. So I think the more we can push to have follow-on research to prove the productivity, and we've been working on some of that stuff, as well as push employers to really engage in that meaningful way as opposed to a window dressing way is important.
Okay, next question.
We have a question back here.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Barbara Neal from Rutgers University, and I was reading the Journal of Financial Planning on the way down on the train this morning, and it was talking about some research that was done where instead of focusing in on a big number, you translate the savings for retirement into monthly income, and they found that people were a lot more motivated if they knew that their savings could give them a whole lot more money in spending when they're in later life. So I was just wondering if anybody had experience with that and would add to that finding.
So this is the question of which there's a lot of focus in the retirement savings community right now on of lifetime savings. And it sounds like the advice here is to look at a discrete number to show specifically what the income per month could be over a lifetime. Anybody want to do it?
Just that I think you're correct that there is some, I'll kind of answer this the way you asked me before. I think there is a convergence and an excitement at the policy level about the tree looking like a stream of income. I'm really mixing my analogies here, but I would say one thing that shifted, I think, in the last 5 years is not retirement, the number, but retirement, what do I want as a cash flow basis? And so I don't think there's a question that's moved. And there are bills that are about disclosure. The Lifetime Income Disclosure Act has been gaining interest, which is to be able to show on your statement, you know, it's not just that you have $500,000 saved after 30 years of work, but that is going to produce a monthly check of $2,000. And, you know, people get motivated thinking, oh, that might not be enough for me. It is a, I'll just say, so I do think, and a policy measure, that whole conversation about income, that it isn't just a sum, but a stream of income, has shifted. And I think people are really questioning since we have a more 401k styled world where people are holding sums, what can we do to help people convert that thinking to a stream and then having that motive? I don't think there's any question that that's moved. I do think, again, it splits the world. It makes very clear the people who are in the system and who are saving at work and the people who aren't, because those folks who aren't getting statements, you know.
Next. Just wait for the mic.
Hi, Caroline Ratcliffe from the Urban Institute. Bill, you made a very nice point about the heterogeneity and the different likelihood of savings by race and educational attainment. So for a fixed level of education, families of color are less likely to save than white families. And this fits in with some work we've been doing at the Urban Institute that shows that families of color are 5 times less likely to receive a large gift or inheritance than a white family. So this has very important implications, you know, sending a child to college or investing in a home, so for their wealth building, and then of course their savings and ability to save into the future.
Comments?
I agree. That's a perennial issue. And as you and Travis and many of us are thinking more about the wealth aspect. It's not just about income, it's about wealth. And also the structure of the balance sheet that a family has turn out to be very important, not just for day-to-day, but these longer-term questions too.
So by structure, Bill, you're talking about type of asset
How much debt a family has, for example.
and type of debt.
Right. And actually, I think it's interesting, sort of the intergenerational transfer also has implications for short-term savings, right? Because if that resource is available for sort of long-term savings, it also suggests that it's there for short-term needs. And I think one of the encouraging things in the survey of consumer finances is, I think, how realistic consumers are about the money they need to have or would like to have. The survey still shows a gap between what households at different income levels and different backgrounds are indicating they would like to have and what they have, to be sure. But I think there's an awareness there of the need for that savings that we should all take some encouragement from.
Okay.
Bob Weinberger from the Aspen Institute. Isn't the larger lesson of behavioral economics what we learned from Social Security and Medicare, and maybe what we're learning from Obamacare, in that if you take all the programs you're talking about that are voluntary, they're really tinkering around the edges. If they were all more successful, dramatically more successful, if financial education was dramatically more successful, we would still have a huge gap between the savings that are needed by low to moderate income individuals and the most successful of these programs. So isn't the larger lesson that the word mandate shouldn't be off the table, and that if we don't have some serious mandates and some bolder programs, all the things that we're talking about and all the behavioral insights are small bore, tinkering around the edges, and they'll never get us to where we need to be?
Good question.
Are you small board?
I mean, I guess if we could wave our magic wand and make some combination of the Hill and the president do what we want to do, absolutely, around things like a realistic tax on inheritance, or I really like to call that the lucky tax. It should really be considered the lucky tax instead of the tax on inheritance. And restructure Social Security to think of it so that it should be higher and more of a defined benefit than relying on defined contribution. That'd be great. I don't think that's the political reality we're living in, and so I think behavioral economics and traditional economics has a lot to offer around, given the political climate we are in and what's on the table, and having to compromise with people. We don't get my way or your way in terms of what we would like to see. Then it has a great deal to offer, and can both make people better off in the long run and reduce suffering significantly. So I think, is it the panacea? No. We shouldn't think that behavioral economics or the application of behavioral economics is a silver bullet that's going to solve all the problems. Can it significantly and helpfully contribute to solving the problems? Yes. So
Let me ask Josh, you say that our political climate, do you think there's any country in the world where those sorts of ideas are?
I'm not a comparative economist or a comparative political science person, so I haven't looked at other countries enough. I think there is acknowledgement that other countries have do more to create a safety net, particularly as you reach retirement age, than the U.S. does.
And I do think other countries are more comfortable in the both-and system, both having a bigger net and mandating things on top of it. The UK just went through a big change in its retirement, the nest system. It just doesn't matter. If you're a small business and you're in business, you will now have to establish a private retirement plan. You'll have to at least, it's essentially an auto-enrollment. You will at least have to enroll send payroll to some other place to allow your workers to start saving. So other systems do have an easier time being a both-and system. And I think in part, Bob's question is that we've always used some behavioral insights in policy, and social insurance does take some of the behavioral insights. It does take some of the automation features. That's a good feature, and it is what people end up liking in the end. So we have been at this, everything old is new again. We have been at some of these things before. My own view is that America will always choose kind of a both-and system. Our social insurance from Roosevelt and Johnson and others, Nixon, took strains of Europe and made it American, and I think we'll keep doing that. But I think the push from this room, all of our thinking, more than 10 years on what household savings needs to look like. To me, it is a necessary next component that isn't here yet, and we're here to be inspired about what it could look like. America Saves, 400,000 savers across America and show to hunger, and this was entirely voluntary. So there's something here. We're not completely lost in a voluntary system, and I don't think the the structures are here. And I think
Josh.
We do actually do a fabulous job in this country of building assets, right? It's just a lot of that, if you look at CFED's asset scorecard and where that money goes, and I think it's Reed's program at New America looks at sort of who's benefiting from that. A lot of that goes to the wealthy through 401k subsidy and through the mortgage tax break. Both those things are pretty behavioral actually in their structure. So why don't we just think about taking those dollars and thinking about how we could apply, use a behavioral approach to get low to moderate income people to build assets in the same way. I think that would be take us a long way towards using a behavioral approach that isn't more costly in total to the country. Now, I realize that politically that would be very challenging, but.
Let me just mention that, if we did have a cradle-to-grave welfare system, a Swedish system, you wouldn't need to save. And I think there is some evidence in Europe that countries with more comprehensive, inclusive welfare systems have low savings rates.
Bill, I wanted to ask you also to comment on how Americans build assets, because your research has pointed to the fact that there was, from your point of view, overinvestment in home equity starting at the beginning of the 2000s. What would you say about that point, that we've done a good job of building assets, and then about alternatives to investment in the home?
I wasn't going to bring it up, but since you did, there is evidence that homeownership crowds out other kinds of saving. And I think we and others have documented that this housing cycle has been very, very damaging, especially to vulnerable groups. Young people, people of color, and people with lower levels of education were disproportionately affected by the housing downturn because of, as you say, what you could call an overinvestment in housing, as well as, and this is the point about the structure of the balance sheet, too much debt and not enough liquid savings. So maybe this is a conversation for another day, but I personally, speaking for myself, I think that was terribly destructive to low and moderate income, or what I would call economically vulnerable groups, to have so much of a focus on homeownership because of the crowding out of other savings and the leverage that was typically involved.
So I'm trying to wake everybody up. You can surround Bill when the panel's done. Other questions?
Hi, I'm Donna Ortega. I'm with the AARP Foundation. I had a question about I absolutely understand that savings is important, and it's probably very heretical to say that retirement savings is something that's very difficult for people to wrap their heads around, especially coming from AARP. But we've been doing some research around how people are motivated to make changes in their financial behavior. And one of the things that seems to be very motivational is the issue of debt. And how does behavioral economics help us to understand ways that we can help people to deal with debt? Because more often than not, that happens to be the biggest barrier to savings. People feel like their debt is overpowering and there's nothing that they can set aside for savings, whether short-term or longer term. Is there anything that behavioral economics can show us about how to help people deal with debt issues?
Very good question. Anybody?
Just a quick one, just in terms of framing, which I think is a behavioral insight, is that paying down debt is saving. That is a very, in fact, I give this advice to anybody who will listen, that paying down your mortgage is the best savings possible, or any debt, from the highest rate down. Even with a mortgage, where else can you get a 4% risk-free return? Nowhere. It should be your absolute number one priority, is paying down debt, and that is savings.
I would just add that behavioral economics has a fair bit to say around something called the ostrich effect related to debt. So Michael Collins isn't here today, but he did work in focus groups in the Midwest where literally people were taking the information they were getting about debt and throwing it directly in the trash or putting it in their couch cushions. So it does say that you'd want to try and concentrate getting people over the first hurdle to have the first conversation, because that is, the ostrich effect is driving them to like basically stick their head in the sand and feel like it's an overwhelming issue, and that if you can focus efforts on that getting people just to engage at the beginning is probably the highest value.
And I'll say a word as I pass it down. I guess the one example I've heard of is a consumer credit counseling service that was working on structuring a savings plan along with a debt restructuring plan. So putting them side by side, think of it as a way to get in the tunnel, because even if there's an ostrich effect, there can be a time where reality calls and that tunnel becomes all-encompassing, and dealing with that debt becomes a necessity because you're about to lose the home or the apartment or the car or whatever it is that is now calling you to attention. So finding a way to plug into that moment, sort of the behavioral economics implication is you've got the attention, how do you use it? And I think that's a nice example of how it was used by that one group.
Okay, we are nearing our official time. I'm looking at the CFA folks. We have a
Two
little
more
more time.
questions, I
Okay,
think.
next question.
I'm Denise Murray from the OCC. With the issue of the discrepancy between Asians and whites and African Americans and Hispanics, and speaking to the woman from the Urban Institute, nobody's talking about income. You have a college-educated African American Hispanic person will come out and make less money than their white or Asian counterpart, and that's going to go all the way down the line. So, and with the transfer of wealth, many professional African American and Hispanics, it's first generation, have the ability to go to college, and didn't have parents to supplement and endow them, so that the income that they get, if they're going to get the house and want to send their kids to college and do some of the average American dream types of things, leaves them with less income to put towards savings. So if you're looking at some of the people that Lisa was talking about, those who don't have availability to a savings plan, many of those people are in, minimum wage jobs. So if you don't have the income, and if your income from the comparative standpoint isn't comparable, then I don't know, that statistic doesn't surprise me, because that just says that's what is. So how do you address it from maybe an income standpoint, or getting them to understand that maybe people to understand that there are better ways to utilize your income? But I think until you address that part of the equation, getting the other side of the equation is always going to be difficult.
Anybody? I would add that, and I alluded to this earlier, the issue is not just lower incomes, but variable incomes, frequent income interruptions for low to moderate income households. So any comment?
Just that I think, what Keith and Bill have and Urban, it's great to have disaggregated data by race. It's just we have to be very careful, to take out income, wealth transfers. I work with Enterprise Hope Corporation in the Mississippi Delta. We've got huge sections of bank deserts. So if you look at a national data set, you don't, if payday lenders are it on your block, where are you going to build this thing? So yes, nationally it's not, I dispute the numbers, but I think we have to be very careful. And what you're pointing out is the intersections of income, of transfers, of wealth. These really influence racial things. It's not, what we would never go away with is some cultural thing that, somebody's more industrious than the next person. Let's at least look, what America Saves has been about is hope for all groups. And, I would never want to take away the assumption of the data that, we just have more cultural proclivity, to savings or not. There's lots of reasons why, why we have different outcomes.
I guess, I would just add a lot of the research in this area actually comes from international efforts to build savings, and in a lot of contexts talking about very low income families and households. And I think what the research really suggests there, and part of this is prompted by your comment, Travis, about volatility of income, is the importance of savings. So I would take your question and go back to the other gentleman's question that was sort of, I think, asking the same question, which is it's very hard with limited income to save, but it may also be very, very important, and maybe even more important in that setting. And I think the research also suggests significant benefits for households with modest liquid savings. You know, there are long-term challenges to retirement and building those assets over time that are very real and undeniable in the literature, but I also think the literature shows real benefits well before we begin to even tackle that question in terms of modest amounts of liquid savings, particularly in secure places.
We have one more question over here.
Last one.
Last one.
Thank you. Paola Diaz with the FDIC. And I was just curious to hear what are policymakers talking about the public welfare system, which, because of its problems, may be a disincentive to savings, especially to what you're saying, is they are talking about matching programs. So this may be a very particular problem with the Hispanic community immigrants.
And I hope you don't forget that question, because I think there is a panel at the end of the day which is looking at public policies fostering savings. I think that we've been stuck for decades on asset tests, which among very low and moderate and very low income people, there are asset tests to various benefit programs. These to me seem misaligned. I understand that for many programs you want to be very careful in what a means testing is so that the right people get a scarce resource. But I'm looking out at my friends Lee from CFED, and we've known for 20 years. We had children's savings accounts that were disrupting the family food stamp benefits. You know, that's, in what universe is that sensible? You know, so I think you're correct. And even if it's not law, it's people's mental views that they will get in trouble for saving in one place. It will hurt family benefits in another. So you're raising an important area of coordination between state and federal policies often that are different. And, you know, I think it's programs like America Saves that have started to push if there's never a push that we need savings, you never get to address these kind of, but certainly we've got to be able to have income supports when families and individuals need them, and admit that we have longer term goals that shouldn't get off track. You know, we shouldn't have to crack the piggy bank just because the family needs other supports. So I think it's
Josh,
important.
you have the last word.
Yeah, I would just add that I think there is this perverse perspective on this, which is the people who are most adamant about this means test are the people that want welfare to not be something that keeps people in poverty. They want it to be a vehicle by which people leave poverty. But if you don't allow people to accumulate assets, either capital assets or human capital, then their chance of leaving poverty is very low, or if they leave, they're highly likely to, your point, come back because of the variability in things. So it seems to me that if we really get our heads screwed on about what the goal of welfare is, if it is about trying to get people to move out of poverty, then helping them build assets as part of that has to be part of the equation.
I will close by mentioning that Pew will be doing research regarding state experiments in lifting asset limits for the food stamp program, SNAP, and for TANF as to what the effect has been, if any, on savings by program participants, state administrative costs, and state caseloads. That research will be led by someone in the room, Clint Keyes. So we're very excited about it, and hopefully in a year or two we'll have some information for you on that question. So thank you to all our panelists. Please join me in thanking them for an excellent discussion.